Remember the 12-year-old girl who traced all the U.S. presidents back to one common ancestor, King John of England? He was House of Plantagenet.
Did you guys know that every single president in U.S. history is related to one king?
What?
Talking about.
This is where it gets crazy. This man, Harold Brooks Baker, he did all this study on U.S. presidents and royal lineage. He had this theory that the presidents weren't voted in by the people, but they were actually selected based on royal bloodline. So 13 or so years ago, this 12-year-old girl, for her 7th grade project, with the help of her grandparents, went down the lineage of each president, and they all connected to one man.
Weird.
All their lineage traced back to King John from the House of Plantagenet.
How is that possible?
And there's a folklore around the House of Plantagenet that they were actually descendants from a demon.
Oh,
What?
that's horrible.
But that's where this dude's theory came in. He's like, it's not about who the people vote for. It's within the candidates that are running for president, who has the more direct bloodline to King John.
So House of Plantagenet. Notice they said in folklore, which is pagan mythology, their polytheist history, that the house was traced back to a demon. Okay, so this is one of his coins here, with a triangle and a circle, like the one on the U.S. dollar. One side has his face, and the other side has the form of a swastika. Kind of see it there. So he was nicknamed John Lackland because he supposedly lost some of his lands within the royal mafia, but it seems like they got him back over here in the U.S. So this hand-hiding Freemasonic vampire, General Marquis de Lafayette, who supposedly was a significant figure in the American Revolution alongside George Washington, is from the French House of Lafayette, and the Lafayettes were nobles of the sword, which means that their members' military service was to the monarchs of France and Britain, specifically the Plantagenets in Britain. I hope you can appreciate how he can't be a hero of any American Revolution since he is a noble of the sword in service to the monarchs, specifically the House of Plantagenet, fitting our pattern of European witches who had a hand in the founding and governing of the U.S. So then it starts to make sense why most U.S. presidents would have a bloodline tie to the House of Plantagenet. More about that house later. And if people doubt this, the Plantagenet dynasty ruled England for over 300 years, so why would people doubt they could rule the U.S. for 250 years? Many of you commented about other places in the U.S. named for Lafayette based on the last couple of videos I did about him. Twixt was the first one, and Marquis de Lafayette, the hand-hiding Freemasonic vampire, was the other one, and I will review some of your comments now. One of the oldest St. Louis prestigious neighborhoods is adorned with Victorian architecture named for General Marie Joseph Paul Roche Yves Gilbert Dumontier Marquis de Lafayette. That's one name. The commenter said, talk about multiple personalities. Lafayette Fountain in Lafayette, Indiana. Purdue University is across from the Wabash Center in West Lafayette. Another said, interesting you mentioned this topic, the affiliation with St. Louis. And they said that because the House of Bourbon with King Louis of France is an offshoot of the House of Plantagenet. They said this place is most aggressively decorated with Freemasonic imagery and history that I've ever seen, particularly the theater downtown. I have seen witchcraft being conducted there. Another said the most posh and famous department stores in France, Galerie Lafayette, are named for him. The one in Paris Boulevard Haussmann with a glass dome. Another commenter said that he lives in Lafayette, Georgia. Another said what came to mind was the show True Blood, who had a character named Lafayette who embodied characteristics of Freemasonic secrets. Another said, seems in my memory this Lafayette was involved with Marie Antoinette. Another said, Fayetteville, Arkansas is named after him too. All Fayettevilles as well. Who would have thought that after all of our schooling? Another said, here in Florida, there is a Lafayette stuff everywhere. Looking up the meaning of the name, it says it's related to beech trees, and some sources say Little Fairy. though this seems redundant given the esoteric meaning of beech trees being the queen of the forest, or also having ties to divination, wisdom, wishing, and not shockingly fairies. Another said, yes, we have plenty of stuff named for him in California too. Here's a white Masonic glove with his vampire face on it. He was a proponent of the Enlightenment and worked with Thomas Jefferson on the Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen, inspired by the Declaration of Independence, and this has the all-seeing eye and the triangle at the top. So let's look at the nobles of the sword. They are noblemen of the oldest class of nobility in France, still in existence by descent. They are specifically the House of Lafayette. So it's not just that the Lafayette family was part of this order, they defined the order. It was originally the knightly class whose members owed military service to the King of France, typically, and other monarchs such as the Plantagenet kings of England. And this is a very important part that we're discussing. And that was in return for possession of feudal landed estates in the king's realm. They played an important part during the French Revolution as well. This was so that the monarchy could remain in power by aligning with the upper middle classes who were gaining power in French society. So, a similar strategy apparently was used here in the U.S. to pretend, okay, yeah, we're an American Revolution, but really the people that were heading that up were aligned with the monarchy. A nobleman of the sword was not recognized unless his family had held this status for at least 3 generations. The nobility of the sword also provided non-military services to the king, but they were specifically Army and Navy held positions, but they also held positions in all branches of government. And what about the nobles of the sword? Were they just a middle-aged knightly order? No, they're still in existence by descent. We just read that. So was Marquis de Lafayette a noble of the sword? It turns out that he's famous for his swords. This one here has a roaring lion on it. At the top, well, it's got this roaring lion, and then it's got this roaring lion. You know, langed roaring lion. And it also has a serpent tail with a little point down here, like the Welsh dragon. Congress commissioned a gold encrusted sword, which they gave to Lafayette, and it was ceremonial. I'm not sure if it's the same one, but Lafayette wrote that he drew his sword in the cause of America, and he was also famous for gifting swords to other people. So yes, he was still a noble of the sword. Now I'm going to play a previous video that I did about the House of Plantagenet, and see their crest is the roaring lion, like the adversary that roams around looking for whom he may devour. And that roaring lion was on the sword also. A subscriber asked me to cover the bloodline House of Plantagenet, which I've touched on in other videos, but I will try to compile that information that I have in this one video. I'm glad that I did that because I gained some clarity and information while compiling this research. Here's what Gary Wayne writes about the House of Plantagenet in his book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. The House of Plantagenet claims royal descent from the Merovingians and are Rex Deus. The Plantagenet House of Anjou was a junior offshoot of the royal Pict and Cid of Anjou. The Picts of Scotland were the infamous third race of the Tuatha De Danann. The title King of Jerusalem is an ancient Rex Deus title of legacy and inheritance that claims the physical and literal rights to Jerusalem. This Rex Deus title will once more be claimed in the last days of this age by the Rex Deus Antichrist when he establishes himself as God in the holy temple of Jerusalem, the abomination that causes desolation. End of quote. And I will just add that this is a Nephilim Raphaim bloodline, which is why they are included in the Genesis 6 conspiracy. The House of Anjou and Plantagenet and their descending houses are Frankish, and the root line of that is Merovingian. Based on Lawrence Gardner's genealogy, this Merovingian branch of the bloodliners began with Merovic and Melusine at the top of that tree. Lawrence Gardner is a royal genealogist, Rosicrucian, and Freemason, and this is Melusine. Merovic and Melusine are listed as the founder of the Merovingian dynasty in 456 AD. From then on, the Frankish kings ruled most of Europe. Merovic is the one whose father was reported to be a Quinatar or a Sea-bull. Referred to as the Beast of Neptune, it was held to have fathered Merovic by attacking the wife of the Frankish king Clodio, and thus to have sired the line of Merovingian kings.
Don't let the dog days of summer get you down. Call Clearwater Plumbing for fast, affordable service. Our
Melusine is depicted as a woman with the lower half of her body as a serpent or fish, like this one in the Orsini Monster Park. And this is a goddess worshipped also by the Scythians, also known as Artampasa. It's the one on the Starbucks logo. This is Orsini Monster Park that was commissioned by a member of the Orsini family. The bloodline house branches of the Plantagenets include in order of descent from the Merovingian line. In order is Anjou, Plantagenet, Bourbon, Orleans, and the cadet branches are York and Lancaster. Every UK monarch from Henry VII, which was in the mid-1400s, to the present has been a descendant of the Plantagenets. For example, Queen Elizabeth II is descended from Queen Elizabeth I, the Fairy Queen. That was on her father's line as a descendant of Queen Victoria. Queen Elizabeth I was descended from the House of York through her grandmother, and the House of York is one of the cadet branches of the Plantagenets, as we said. Therefore, Merovic and Melusine are associated with the ruling houses of Anjou, Plantagenet, Bourbon, Orleans, York, Lancaster, and every British UK monarch from the mid-1400s onward. This is documented in Lawrence Gardner's book, The Realm of the Ringlords. So from the Franks and Merovingians, it then moves on to the House of Anjou, which is the origination of the House of Plantagenet. Then in Gardner's account in 733 AD, the Count of Anjou married a different Melusine, who was also known as Fay de la Fontaine, who was a Scythian, and Fay is another word for fairy. And that Anjou line is the one that descended into the elf kings in Gardner's account, which included Charlemagne, who knights originated with. From there, the bloodline Merovingian houses descended into the House of Plantagenet. The House of Plantagenet was founded by Count Geoffrey V of Anjou in 1129 AD. Count Geoffrey V of Anjou was the father of Henry II, so Henry II is the first of the Plantagenet kings. The Plantagenet family held the English throne from 1154 with Henry II until 1485 with Richard III. Henry II was the father of that King John, who all the U.S. presidents trace back to. Edward the Black Prince was House of Plantagenet. Here he is wearing the Order of the Garter emblem on his cape, Richard III. This was Edward the Black Prince. Here is the heraldic badge of the Black Prince with the 3 ostrich feathers, which are worn on the signet ring of King Charles III. And Richard III was the last of the Plantagenet dynasty, and he was King of England from 1452 to 1485. The Plantagenet kings were portrayed by Shakespeare in plays, including the play Richard III. Here are the countries and titles held by the House of Plantagenet. You have Kingdom of England, Kingdom of France, Lordship of Ireland, Principality of Wales, Holy Roman Empire. Titles are King of England, King of France, King of the Romans, King of Sicily, Lord of Ireland, Lord of Cyprus, Prince of Wales, Duke of Aquitaine, Normandy, Brittany, Gascony, Cornwall, Gloucester, Clarence, Count of Anjou, Maine, Mortain, Nantes, Poitou, Earl of Buckingham, Cornwall, Chester, Essex, Ulster, Norfolk, Kent, Lancaster, Leicester, Salisbury, and Richmond. So that's more than just England. That's most of Europe. The House of Anjou, Plantagenet, merged with the House of Bourbon, that most of the Louis of France are part of the House of Bourbon. Connétable de Bourbon was the most powerful lord in France in the early 16th century, great-grandson of René Anjou. So the House of Bourbon, with all the King Louis of France, are part of this line. And this is a painting of Louis XIV and his family dressed up as Roman gods. But it's not just Europe. Let's look at all the places in the United States named after this line, remembering that the branches are all the monarchs of Europe descended from the mid-1400s onward. First, we can do the states. Georgia is named for King George II of Britain. Louisiana is named for Louis XIV of France, a Bourbon. Maryland is named for Queen Henrietta Maria of England, Queen of England and Scotland from the 1700s. New York is named for James, Duke of York, who later became King James II of England. North and South Carolina are named for Charles IV of France. Virginia and West Virginia are named for Queen Elizabeth I. I'm going to skip over the counties and boroughs, but there are a lot, as you can see. Cities, and I'll just name some of them, but there are a lot, as you can see. Annapolis, Maryland is named for Queen Anne of Great Britain. Charleston, Mississippi, Charleston, South Carolina, and Charleston, Rhode Island are named for King Charles II of England. St. Louis is named for King Louis IX of the House of Bourbon. Louisville, Kentucky is named for King Louis XVI of the House of Bourbon. Jamestown, Virginia, and Rhode Island are named for King James I and II of England. New Orleans and Louisiana and Orleans, Massachusetts are named for Philip II, Duke of Orleans. And New York City and York, Maine are named for the Duke of York, James, who later became James II of England. Bourbon Street in New Orleans is named for the Bourbons.
If you're a woman over 40, this is how you get in shape fast.
Have you seen this guy? You know, the one that keeps telling.
And there are many other streets, schools, universities, rivers, buildings, etc., all named for this bloodline. In Canada, there's a township called Plantagenet. It's close to Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, where a witness that I had extensive communication with encountered a fallen angel, and I covered that in my video titled Falling Angels. The Plantagenet township is described as a Franco-Ontario township named after the House of Plantagenet. That witness said that he became familiar with elites who did summoning in that area, but that witness did not implicate any Plantagenets in his communication with me. I just assumed that they were probably involved. In addition to those we already reviewed, many other houses claim descent from the Merovingians, including the Habsburg-Lorraine family, the Luxembourgs, the Sinclairs, all Rex Deuce. These Merovingians are often associated with vampires. Aachen Cathedral, where Charlemagne is buried, has the bat on the back of the lectern. The Anjou line is the one that descended into the Elf Kings, which included Charlemagne, in Gardner's account. So it's no coincidence that New Orleans is associated with vampires. The Bourbons are the Louis, remember, and also they're the ones highlighted in vampire movies such as Interview with the Vampire. Vampires are also often referred to as Shining Ones, which is why you have Robert Pattinson, who played Edward Cullen in the Twilight movies, depicted as a Shining One. See my video titled Cuchulainn for the name origin of Cullen. Robert Pattinson is related in real life to Vlad Dracula, or Vlad of Wallachia, another Scythian, the same Vlad Dracula or Vlad of Wallachia that King Charles III says he descends from, and the same one who is also listed in the Realm of the Ring Lord's genealogy tree. So all of this is why Grimes is depicted as a Shining One, fairy, elven, vampire. She's channeling the externalization of the hierarchy, and maybe she's a homunculus. Her father was in biotech. Thanks for listening. All right, so the reason that so much of the United States is also named for General Marquis de Lafayette, the hand-hiding Freemasonic vampire, is because he's a noble of the sword in military service to all of those bloodliners I just went over. Thanks for listening.